The phone screen was a harsh glare in the dim study. Julian Vance had just flipped to the last page of the thin medical report, his fingertip resting on the cold, printed words. Patient reports long-term use of oral contraceptives. The report was dated last week. Chloe's signature was neat and clear. He remembered her coming home that day, a little tired, saying the annual company physical was just a pointless chore. He'd even given her a shoulder rub. Then his phone buzzed. Not a call, but a rapid series of WhatsApp notifications, urgent as a death knell. The message was from a stranger, an unfamiliar profile picture, but he recognized the group chat name that followed. Ivy Creek High 08, Chloe's old high school group. He tapped it open without thinking. A few photos popped up first. The lighting was dark, the background a tacky disco ball in a karaoke bar, its reflections dazzling and chaotic. In the center of the frame, a woman was blindfolded, a strip of black cloth knotted behind her head. It was Chloe. She was wearing the cream-colored cashmere dress he'd bought her. But right now, she looked utterly lost. Her body was tilted forward, stiff as if she'd been shoved, her hands groping blindly in the air. Below the photos was a video, only a dozen seconds long. Julian pressed play. A tidal wave of deafening cheers and jeers shattered the study silence. Go on, Chloe, touch it. Don't chicken out. Yeah, Ryan's face is the easiest one to guess. It's always so greasy. Next. Mark Phillips. Mark's got a thick skin. Ha, Leah, get a clear shot. Post in the group. Let everyone who bailed see what they're missing. The camera shook, zeroing in on the blindfolded Chloe. A man in a flashy pink shirt stood in front of her, a smug grin plastered on his face. Ryan Carter, the one they just named. Chloe's hands, hesitant and visibly reluctant, were pushed forward by someone at her side, inching closer to Ryan's leering face. Her fingertips finally trembled as they made contact with his oily cheekbone. Whoa, Chloe's touch is soft. Ryan yelped, and the crowd erupted in another round of louder laughter and whistles. Chloe snatched her hand back as if she'd been burned. She turned her head toward the noise, her lips moving, but whatever she was saying was completely drowned out by the uproar. In the chaotic lights, her cheeks were an unnatural, feverish red. The video ended abruptly. The final frame was a free shot of Chloe's hand suspended in midair and Ryan's sickening grin practically pressed against the camera lens. A dead silence descended on the study, broken only by Julian's own ragged breathing and the blood pounding in his temples. He stared at the phone, its glaring light reflected in his bottomless eyes like two cold, distant stars. The medical report was still open on the desk. Long-term use of oral contraceptives. The words were seared onto his retinas like a branding iron. 5 years. They had been married for 5 years. He remembered every time she had snuggled into his arms, her voice a soft purr. Julian, honey, can we just wait a little longer? Until the company is more stable, until we have more time to just be us. We'll have kids. Eventually, he had believed her. He thought it was their shared plan, a careful consideration for their future. It was all a meticulously crafted lie. She had been on the pill the entire time, deceiving him, using his own desire for a future to block his path to fatherhood. And now, on his phone screen, his wife was being blindfolded in front of a crowd, treated like a plaything, shoved around to touch other men's faces. The laughter, the whistles, the vulgar jokes, they were 1,000 tiny needles piercing his eardrums, stabbing into his heart. Deceit, humiliation, betrayal, an icy rage. A polar current swept through his entire body, freezing the turmoil of emotions into a pure, devastatingly calm focus. He picked up his own phone, unlocked the screen, and found the profile of the man who had been cheering the loudest, laughing the hardest in that video, Ryan Carter. His fingertips tapped against the cold glass. Every letter was a shard of ice. Hope you had fun. Message sent. No emoji, no punctuation. Just those 4 words, landing with the weight of an anvil on a world lost in its own cheap thrills. Julian put down his phone and leaned back, sinking deep into the plush leather of his chair. The heavy curtains of the study blocked out the world, leaving only the cold, spectral glow of his computer and phone screens to illuminate the hard, emotionless lines of his profile. He was like a predator awakening in the darkness, all sound and fury suppressed, leaving only the suffocating stillness that comes before the kill. The storm was brewing in silence, and the prey had no idea. The city's neon lights cast a flickering pattern across Julian's face through the blinds. He sat before his computer, the monitor's bluish light reflecting in his deep-set eyes. The medical report and the screenshots from the high school group chat were displayed side by side on a second screen. A pair of daggers twisted in his heart, a cold reminder of the farce his 5-year marriage had been. He didn't smash things. He didn't scream or make a single hysterical phone call. The extremity of his rage had birthed a terrifying, almost inhuman calm. He required efficiency, precision. He needed to make those laughing voices pay a price they couldn't possibly afford. His fingers flew across the keyboard, a blur of motion. The first target he pulled up was the woman in the video holding her phone, screaming excitedly to get a clear shot. Leah Collins. She'd been a motor mouth in high school, and now ran an influencer-style med spa, Glow by Leah, which she'd built by networking with old classmates and curating a flawless socialite life on Instagram. Glow. Julian's lips twisted into a glacial smile. Soon, the lights would go out. He breached the back end of several major local review platforms like Yelp and Google. A few carefully fabricated one-star reviews, loaded with incendiary keywords like chemical burns, unlicensed products, and horrible hygiene, silently appeared among the most recent feedback, immediately pinned to the top. Simultaneously, several local lifestyle bloggers with sizable followings receive anonymous customer tips via email, complete with blurry but sufficiently alarming photos of faces swollen with allergic reactions. With that done, he switched targets. Mark Phillips, the guy in the video who had gleefully offered up his face for Chloe to touch. The kind of man who constantly bragged in the group chat about his big construction projects, but was really just a small-time con artist, robbing Peter to pay Paul. Julian easily traced his precarious line of credit and found he was desperately trying to scam another bridge loan from a high-risk lender called Apex Capital Funding. Julian's fingers paused over the keyboard for a second before he opened a secure messaging app. A contact named Shadow was online. Apex Capital Funding. Mark Phillips. I'm sending you the file. Make sure he gets the money today, Julian typed, attaching an encrypted data packet containing the forged contracts and falsified revenue statements Mark had created, just convincing enough to pass a cursory risk assessment. Understood. Max interest rate. Shadow replied instantly. Max rate. Shortest term, Julian confirmed. He didn't want the money. He wanted the final straw that would break the camel's back. He wanted Mark to experience the euphoria of a last-minute rescue, only to be plunged into the abyss of absolute despair. Finally, Ryan Carter, the ringleader. Julian opened a Bloomberg terminal, typing in the stock ticker for Ryan's publicly traded company, Momentum Tech. The candlestick chart flickered on the screen. He pulled up the last few quarterly earnings reports, his eyes sharp as a hawk's, and immediately locked on several well-hidden but glaringly obvious, to him, traces of financial fraud. Inflated revenues, related party transactions, misappropriation of funds. The methods weren't particularly sophisticated, but they were bold and the numbers were huge. He opened a new document and began to type. A clear, concise, and perfectly documented anonymous whistleblower report, enough to bring Momentum Tech crashing down, took shape under his fingers. The recipient was set to the SEC's most notoriously relentless enforcement division. The send time was scheduled for 9:30 a.m. the next morning, the exact moment the market opened. By the time he was finished, the sky outside was beginning to pale. Julian leaned back in his chair and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He hadn't slept, yet his eyes showed no trace of fatigue, only a cold, sharp clarity. His phone vibrated on the desk. It was a text from Chloe. Hey, babe, the reunion ran super late last night, so I just crashed at a hotel near Leah's place. Didn't want to wake you. Just woke up thinking of you. It's Saturday. I want to get lunch. The sight of the heart emoji deepened a frost in Julian's eyes. He picked up the phone, his thumb hovering over the screen for a few seconds before he replied. Sounds good. Something urgent came up at the office, so I might not make it back for lunch. Let's plan on dinner. His tone was placid, without a ripple of emotion. He set the phone down, rose, and walked to the massive floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the awakening city below. In the first light of dawn, the steel and glass forest looked cold and immense. He was like a grandmaster watching the board, seeing the pieces, all unaware, move inexorably toward the traps he had so carefully laid. The web was set. The first of the prey was about to be snared. Chapter 3. Mark Phillips felt like he'd hit the jackpot. He sat in the garish, gold-plated office of Apex Capital CO, his eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights, a scruffy beard shadowing his jaw. Across the desk, the CEO, a bloated man named Mr. Warren, was squinting at the project proposal and bank statements Mark had handed over. Mark's heart was in his throat. This was the umpteenth lender he'd approached. The others had either demanded more collateral than he had, or quoted interest rates that were pure extortion. His supposed eco-resort project was a shell company built on hot air. The cash flow had dried up months ago, and creditors were practically camping on his doorstep. If he didn't get this money, he was skipping town. Mr. Warren drew out the sound, his fat fingers tapping the proposal. Mr. Phillips, this project of yours, it has potential. Mark's heart sank. He'd heard that line before. It was always followed by a but. But Warren's tone shifted. The risk isn't small. In this economy. Just as Mark was about to launch into his best sales pitch, the intercom on Warren's desk buzzed. Warren answered irritably. What is it? Oh, I see. He put the phone down. When he looked at Mark again, his beady eyes were shining, and his face was wreathed in an effusive smile. Well now, Mr. Phillips, my apologies. You should have just said, a mutual friend put in a good word. This project of yours, Apex Capital, is in, for the full amount, and the interest. We can be very flexible. Mark was stunned. A tidal wave of pure joy washed over him. A mutual friend? Who? He mentally scrolled through every powerful person he knew and came up blank. But who cared? The money was coming. Mr. Warren, you've saved my life, Mark stammered. So overcome with emotion, he almost lunged across the desk to kiss the man's greasy face. Not at all. Mr. Phillips, we'll have the contract drawn up immediately. Sign on the dotted line, and the funds will be in your account this afternoon. Warren boomed, his enthusiasm so over the top it felt surreal. But the promise of a contract and a wire transfer banished any lingering doubts from Mark's mind. At that same moment, at the Glow by Leah Med Spa, 10:00 a.m., the time when the first clients of the day should be arriving. Instead, the salon was thick with tension. The receptionist's face was pale, the phone glued to her ear. Hello, Glow by Leah. What? Mrs. Davis, you're canceling your afternoon facial. May I ask why? An allergic reaction? That's impossible. All of our products are. Hello. The line went dead. She had barely put the receiver down when it rang again. Is Leah there? Put her on the phone. I used that serum your spa recommended, and my face is swollen like a basketball. You owe me an explanation and compensation, or I'm suing. Ma'am, please calm down. I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding, my ass. It's all over the internet. Your spa uses counterfeit products. You're a scam. You're finished. Leah, dressed in her most expensive Chanel suit, stalked through the salon, her normally perfect makeup failing to hide the fury twisting her features. She had just finished dealing with an irate longtime client who was threatening to report her to the Better Business Bureau when her phone buzzed incessantly. It was a DM from a popular local food and lifestyle blogger. Leah, what's going on? Your spa is getting slammed with bad reviews online, and some of the pictures look really bad. My followers are tagging me, asking what's up. Did you piss someone off? Leah's fingers trembled as she clicked the link. She saw her spa's Yelp page, the top reviews now screaming warnings with attached photos of red, inflamed skin. Local forums had threads exploding with sensational headlines. Is influencer spa Glow by Leah a back alley nightmare? And Glow exposed for using black market products, multiple clients disfigured. The world swam before her eyes. She nearly collapsed. The photos were obviously fake. The lighting was dramatic. The angles all wrong. Someone was setting her up? Who? She mentally ran through a list of her competitors, and then her mind flashed back to the reunion last night. The videos she'd taken, the photos she'd posted. A cold dread washed over her. It couldn't be, could it? Just for a stupid joke? Get those reviews taken down. Now. Call Yelp, call Google. and issue a statement. Say we're the victims of a malicious smear campaign. Call the police. I want to file a report. Leah shrieked at her spa manager, her voice shrill with fear and rage. But it was too late. The negative press was spreading like a virus, and her denials were lost in a sea of outrage and suspicion. The phone lines were jammed with cancellations. Clients already in the middle of treatments saw the news on their phones and demanded to leave immediately, creating chaos. Glow, the brand she had poured her life into, was imploding before her very eyes. At 3 p.m., Mark Phillips's ecstasy reached its peak. The crisp chime of a text message echoed in his office. Chase Bank, a direct deposit of $1 500,000 has been made to your account, ending in XXXX. Your new balance is $1 502,367. 85. I'm invincible, Mark yelled, dancing around his office. He immediately called his most persistent creditors. Hey, Dave, the money. Don't worry about it. It's on its way, principal plus interest. You know Mark Phillips is a man of his word. Mr. Chun, stop calling. The wire is coming. I'll even have a new project for you next month. He could already see it. His debts cleared, his reputation restored. He even started calculating how much he could skim off the top to lease a new Porsche and maybe take a little trip to Vegas. Humming to himself, he opened his laptop to check his stock portfolio and relax. He typed in the ticker for a tech stock he'd recently invested in, but before the chart could load, a bright red, bold-faced news alert popped up. Frowny face breaking news. Momentum Tech, ticker MMTK, under investigation by SEC for significant accounting fraud. Trading halted after stock plummets 30% at market open. The smile froze on Mark's face. His eyes bulged as he stared at the headline, the words blurring together. Momentum Tech, Ryan Carter's company, fraud, investigation, halted. An icy chill shot up his spine. He suddenly remembered that a huge chunk of the life-saving loan he'd just received had been secured by leveraging his shares in Momentum Tech. Ryan had sworn to him the company was solid, that the stock could only go up if Momentum Tech was a fraud. If the stock became worthless, the collateral for his loan would be zero, and those sharks at Apex Capital. Mark's hands started to shake violently. He fumbled for his phone to call Ryan, but his fingers refused to obey. Just then, his office door was slammed open. Apex Capital's Mr. Warren stormed in, flanked by several large, menacing-looking men. The morning's warm smile was gone, replaced by a predatory snarl. Phillips, Warren's voice was a guttural roar. You thought you could pull a fast one on me with worthless stock? You'll pay back every single cent I gave you, right now, with interest, or else. One of the thugs cracked his knuckles, the sound echoing in the small office. Mark stared at the terrifying headline on his laptop, then at the furious creditors before him, and finally at the bank app on his phone, with a number that had brought him so much joy just moments ago now seemed to mock him. A metallic taste filled his mouth. It was over. It was all over. His vision went dark. His body swayed, then slid from his chair like a boneless puppet, collapsing to the floor. His phone clattered to the ground, the screen shattering. The darkness of utter despair swallowed him whole. The collapse was happening on all fronts simultaneously, and all of it just a dozen hours after Julian Vance had pressed send. Ryan Carter woke up to a vicious, throbbing headache. The hangover was a nauseating storm in his stomach, his mouth dry and sour. He fumbled for his phone, the screen's brightness making him wince. 10:30 a.m. He cursed under his breath. Last night's reunion had gotten out of hand, and then a few sycophantic old classmates had dragged him out for a second round, plying him with expensive whiskey until he was blackout drunk. He was rubbing his temples, about to call his assistant for an espresso, when his phone began to vibrate uncontrollably. It wasn't a single call. It was an explosion of notifications, hundreds of texts, DMs, and missed calls flooding his screen from company executives, board members, and his most important business partners. A sense of dread seized him, cutting through the alcoholic fog. He shot upright in bed and tapped on the first message from his company's corporate secretary. It was a single line of text that felt like an ice pick to the eye. Ryan, it's a catastrophe. The SEC is here. They have a warrant. They're saying we're under investigation for massive accounting fraud. They're seizing all our servers and financial records, the stock. The stock has collapsed. Ryan's mind went blank. Fraud, SEC, warrant, collapsed. With a trembling finger, he opened his brokerage app and typed in his company's ticker, MMTK. On the screen, the line representing Momentum Tech stock price wasn't just dropping. It was a near-vertical, despair-inducing green cliff. Beside it, the bright red number screamed, -30, 0%. And next to that, the dreaded symbol, trading halted. No, that's impossible. Ryan choked out, his voice a hoarse croak. He refreshed the page frantically, praying it was a glitch. But more news alerts were already pushing to his screen. Frowny face Momentum Tech implicated in systemic accounting fraud. SEC launches emergency investigation. MMTK crashes at opening bell. Trading halted, sending shockwaves through tech sector. Exclusive. Whistleblower alleges Momentum Tech inflated revenue by over $1 billion through shell corporations. Every headline was a sledgehammer blow to his chest. His face turned as white as the sheets, and a cold sweat drenched his silk pajamas. It was over. It was all over. The creative accounting, the funds funneled through offshore entities, the inflated contracts he thought were so clever. How? How could they have found out so quickly and with such precision? Who? Who stabbed me in the back? His thoughts were a chaotic mess. His first suspect was a corporate rival, but how could they have obtained such critical, damning evidence? And to move with such speed and ruthlessness, leaving him no time to react? Just then, his bedroom door swung open. It wasn't his assistant. It was his wife, Sophia. She was dressed in a sharp power suit, her makeup flawless. But her beautiful face held none of its usual warmth or indulgence. It was a mask of cold, cruel tranquility. In her hand, she held a thick manila envelope. Sophia, what are you doing here? Ryan stammered, trying to regain some composure. There's a little situation at the company I was just about to head in. A little situation? Sophia laughed, a sound like shattering ice. Your stock is worthless, and the SEC is tearing your office apart. You call that a little situation? She held up the envelope. Perhaps this is the root of your little situation, Ryan. Ryan's heart plummeted. He took the envelope with a shaking hand and tore it open. Inside was a thick stack of photographs, printed text messages, and hotel receipts. The photos were all of him, with his arms around a parade of different young, beautiful women, entering and exiting lavish hotels and exclusive clubs. The evidence spanned years. The text messages were graphic and explicit, detailing affairs with not one, but multiple women, along with bank records of him paying for their cars, apartments, and shopping sprees. The most damning photo had been taken just last night, outside the karaoke bar where the reunion had been held. The timestamp was 1:15 a.m. He was holding a scantily clad young woman, not Chloe, and certainly not Sophia, and whispering intimately in her ear. 17 of them. Sophia's voice was terrifyingly calm, as if stating a fact about the weather. You're truly something else, Ryan. 7 years of marriage, and you kept 17 mistresses on the side. You must be a master of time management. Sophia, listen to me. You have to listen. This is all fake. It's photoshopped. Someone is trying to frame me. Ryan was in a full-blown panic. He scrambled toward her, trying to grab her hand, but she snatched it away in disgust. Frame you? Sophia looked at him as if he were the biggest joke she'd ever heard. She pointed to a photo of him with a minor celebrity on a yacht. This one was taken last month, on my father's birthday, the day you told me you were flying to London for an emergency board meeting. And these bank transfers, they're from the account funded by my dowry, the seed money you use to start your company. It's all here, Ryan. Do you think I'm an idiot? She took a deep breath, her eyes like daggers. I'm not here to listen to your lies. I'm here to inform you that my lawyer will be sending over the divorce papers this afternoon. All of your assets, including your now worthless Momentum Tech stock, have been frozen pending the settlement. You will not get 1 cent of what belongs to me or my family. And as for your extracurricular activities, she glanced at the sorted photos, get ready to be served. Adultery, fraudulent conveyance of marital assets. You're going to be busy for a very long time. No, Sophia, you can't. We're married. For God's sake, think of everything we've been through. Ryan completely fell apart, tears and snot streaming down his face as he dropped to his knees and grabbed her leg. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. They seduced me. I was weak. Please just give me one more chance for our son's sake, please. Our son. The word seemed to trigger something in her. She ripped her leg away from his grasp and looked down at the man who was once a titan of industry and was now a pathetic, groveling mess. Her eyes were filled with pure, unadulterated hatred. You don't get to say his name, and you certainly don't get to say the word married. You remember this, Ryan. Everything you lost today, you did to yourself. With that, she turned her back on the broken man on the floor. She walked out, her back straight, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor like the steady advance of a drawn sword. Sophia, Sophia. Ryan's desperate screams echoed in the vast, empty bedroom, but there was no reply. He lay crumpled on the floor, surrounded by the scattered evidence of his own filth and deceit. On his phone, the stock ticker was a monument to his ruin, and the missed calls were a chorus of doom. His company was gone. His family was gone. His reputation was gone. And his money was gone. An immense, suffocating tide of fear and despair pulled him under. He couldn't understand how it had all happened. Who? Who could have possibly orchestrated his complete and utter destruction from the heights of success to the ninth circle of hell in less than 24 hours? His phone buzzed one last time. A new message. It was from an unsaved, unknown number. Like a drowning man grasping at a reed, he shakily opened it. It was just a single image. A high-resolution screenshot from last night's reunion. In the center of the frame was a blindfolded, helpless-looking Chloe, her hand being forced onto his own smug, leering face. Beneath the image was a single line of text. The same message he'd received last night. Hope you had fun. Boom. It felt like a physical blow to his head. His mind went white. That cryptic message from last night. Julian Vance. It was Chloe's quiet, unassuming husband. A paralyzing cold shot up his spine, freezing the blood in his veins. He remembered Julian's eyes, always so deep and detached, as if he were watching the world from a great distance. It wasn't silence, it was dormancy. It was the dead calm of the ocean before a hurricane. He hadn't been teasing some pushover. He had poked a sleeping dragon, and now it had woken up and burned his entire world to the ground. Julian Vance. Ryan let out an animalistic howl of pure terror and regret. But it was far too late. The fire he had so carelessly started had now consumed everything he ever had. Julian sat in the VIP client lounge of Roth, Adler & Finch, the city's top law firm. Through the panoramic window, the downtown skyline glittered, and sunlight cast bright squares on the polished obsidian conference table. The air smelled of expensive coffee and old money. Across from him sat David Roth, a senior partner with meticulously combed hair and gold-rimmed glasses. Roth was a legend in divorce and corporate litigation, renowned for his aggressive tactics and undefeated record, with fees to match. Mr. Vance, the evidence you've provided is airtight, Roth said, his voice calm and professional. He pushed a thick file across the table toward Julian. Mrs. Miller's long-term, undisclosed use of contraceptives constitutes a material breach of the marital contract, specifically regarding the mutual understanding of procreation. This is legally defined as fraud. Furthermore, her participation in a lewd and degrading activity in a public setting, documented by video, has caused severe emotional distress and damage to your reputation, violating the basic tenets of fidelity and public decency. He paused, tapping a manicured finger on a file. Based on these facts, we will proceed with the divorce filing on the grounds that Mrs. Miller is the at-fault party. As such, she will forfeit any claim to your primary assets. This includes your controlling shares in Keystone Capital, the 3 real estate properties purchased before the marriage or with your personal postnuptial funds, and all liquid assets held in your personal accounts. She will be entitled only to a minimal, legally mandated settlement for basic living expenses, which will not be drawn from your core holdings. The file contained pages of ironclad clauses, a fortress of legal jargon designed to completely wall Chloe off from Julian's financial empire. Julian's eyes scanned the terms. His face was a mask. He gave a slight nod. Acceptable. Additionally, Roth continued, producing another document regarding the condominium in her name at the Lakeview Terrace development, which was a gift from your late mother. The deed of gift contains a specific reversionary clause. The property is for her personal use only and cannot be sold or mortgaged. In the event of a marital dissolution, the gift is revoked and the property reverts to the grantor or their designated heir. This is legally sound. Good. Julian's voice was flat. His mother had adored Chloe and insisted on giving her the apartment. Now, it would return to its rightful owner. He would strip Chloe of everything that connected her to him. Finally, Roth leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping, regarding your request for a specific venue for the formal separation announcement. This falls outside our standard legal services. However, as your counsel, I must advise you to ensure any actions taken remain within the bounds of the law to avoid any potential countermeasures. Julian lifted his bone china coffee cup. The bitter liquid did nothing to stir the placid surface of his composure. He met the lawyer's gaze, his eyes so calm they seemed to exert a physical pressure in the room. "Don't worry, Mr. Roth," Julian said, setting the cup down with a crisp click. "I'm merely inviting a few people to a show. A long overdue final curtain call. That's all." His tone, though quiet, held an absolute authority that brooked no further questions. Roth simply nodded. "I understand. I will have the final documents prepared. We can initiate proceedings whenever you give a word." "Thank you for your time," Julian said, rising to his feet. He was silent during the ride back to the villa in his understated black Bentley. Leaning back against the leather, he closed his eyes. His phone vibrated. A text from Chloe. "Still swamped at the office. What do you want for dinner tonight? I can start prepping." He glanced at the cloying emoji, a flicker of contempt in his eyes. He typed a reply. "Have a client dinner. Don't wait up." Sent. The car pulled up to their modern, three-story villa. Julian unlocked the heavy bronze door with his thumbprint and stepped inside. The house was quiet. Chloe didn't seem to be home. He walked past the master bedroom on his way to his study and paused. The door was slightly ajar, and he could hear a rustling sound from within. He pushed the door open. Chloe was kneeling on the floor of the walk-in closet, her back to him. Her Louis Vuitton handbag was open. Its contents spilled out as she frantically searched for something. The sound of the door made her jump. She whipped around, a small pill bottle and a foil blister pack still clutched in her hand. It was her birth control. The color drained from her face. Her eyes were wide with the sheer terror of being caught. "J. Julian," she stammered, her lips trembling. You're home. I thought you said." Julian's gaze swept over her pale face and landed on the small white bottle in her hand. The air in the room seemed to solidify. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse. His expression betrayed no surprise at all. His eyes were terrifyingly calm, as if he were observing a trivial, inanimate object. "Looking for something?" he asked, his voice devoid of any inflection. Chloe flinched as if struck. She shoved the pills behind her back. "And nothing. They're just vitamins. Yeah, vitamins. I've been feeling a little run down." "I see," Julian replied coolly, his gaze already moving past her, utterly uninterested in her pathetic lie. He turned and walked down the hall to his study. The study door clicked shut, sealing him off. Chloe remained frozen, the cold plastic of the pill bottle digging into her palm. Julian's absolute calm was infinitely more terrifying than any rage-filled confrontation. His eyes had held nothing. Not love, not anger, not even disappointment. Just a vast, chilling emptiness. She slumped against the doorframe, her legs giving out from under her, as a tidal wave of pure, unadulterated panic crashed over her. A massive crystal chandelier bathed the villa's vaulted living room in brilliant light. The air, filled with the scent of expensive champagne and catered hors d'oeuvres, was layered with the gentle melody of a live pianist. It was the picture of a sophisticated private dinner party, except for the palpable, suffocating tension on the faces of the guests. The attendees were the core cast from the reunion. A ghostly pale Leah Collins, a haggard Mark Phillips forcing a smile, and a few others who had cheered the loudest that night, now huddled in corners, trying to make themselves invisible. They had all received an elegant invitation from Julian and Chloe for a thank-you dinner, and while their instincts screamed at them to stay away, no one had dared to refuse. The news of what had happened to Ryan Carter was already circulating in hushed whispers. Chloe stood beside Julian in a perfectly tailored pearl-white dress, her smile as stiff and brittle as a porcelain mask. She had no idea why Julian had insisted on this party or why he'd invited these specific people. Ever since the day he'd found her with the pills, a cold, creeping dread had taken root in her heart. He was still polite, but it was the detached politeness one shows a stranger, an icy wall that left her feeling utterly alone and terrified. "Chloe, you look gorgeous," Leah cooed, approaching with a glass of champagne, her eyes darting nervously around the room. "It's so thoughtful of Julian to have us all over." Chloe managed a weak smile. "We're happy you could make it." She glanced at her husband. He was speaking quietly with another former classmate, his profile sharp and unreadable, a faint, chilling smirk playing on his lips. Halfway through the evening, the atmosphere had begun to thaw slightly under the influence of alcohol and forced pleasantries. Mark Phillips was even starting to brag about a huge deal he had just closed. It was then that Julian gently set down his champagne flute. The light clink of crystal on glass cut through the chatter, instantly silencing the room. All eyes turned to him as he rose to his feet, his tall frame casting a long, intimidating shadow. His expression was neutral as his gaze swept over the guests, finally landing on Chloe, whose face had already begun to pale. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice calm but with a metallic edge that commanded attention. "Tonight, beside catching up, I wanted to show you all something. A little party favor from our last get-together." Before he finished speaking, the enormous projection screen that took up an entire wall of the living room flared to life. A deafening roar of cheers and jeers exploded from the high-end speakers, the same sounds from that chaotic karaoke room, now amplified 100 times over. "Go on, Chloe, touch it. Don't chicken out." "Yeah, Ryan's face is the easiest one to guess." "Leah, get a clear shot. Post it in the group." The image was crystal clear, far sharper and more damning than the grainy video on his phone. There, on the massive screen, was Chloe, blindfolded and helpless, her hand being physically forced on her Ryan Carter's smug face while the crowd's expressions were a grotesque collage of drunken excitement. Ryan's lewd shout, "Whoa!" Chloe's touch is soft, echoed through the silent, cavernous living room. A shrill scream tore through the air. It was Chloe. She stared at the screen, at the humiliating spectacle of herself being treated like a prop in someone else's crude game. The blood drained from her face, leaving it a deathly white. Shame and horror washed over her in a suffocating wave. "Turn it off! Julian, please, turn it off! I'm begging you," she cried, her voice cracking as she lunged for his arm. He sidestepped her with fluid grace. He didn't even look at her. His cold gaze moved slowly, deliberately, over the faces of his guests, each one now a mask of shock and horror. Leah's champagne glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor, red wine splashing across her expensive dress like blood. She stared at the screen, at her own distorted, gleeful face, her own voice shrieking, "Get a clear shot." Mark Phillips's forced smile had frozen and collapsed. He saw himself on screen, grinning like an idiot, and a cold dread, worse than any he'd felt before, seized him. The video played on, a symphony of their own cruelty. "Wasn't that fun?" Julian's voice sliced through the noise, calm and terrifying. "That was the game you all enjoyed so much." He raised a hand, pointing to the screen, which was now frozen on the final humiliating frame. And now, his gaze finally settled on his weeping, broken wife, his voice dropping to an icy whisper that carried to every corner of the room. "You all get to watch me divorce her." The word struck Chloe with the force of a physical blow. Her legs gave out, and she crumpled to the floor, the pearl-white dress pooling around her. Her face was buried in her hands, her body racked with silent, agonizing sobs. Her dignity, her marriage, her entire life. He had just torn it all to shreds and set it on fire for everyone to see. The public execution was complete. The hunter watched, unmoved, as his prey bled out on the floor. The suffocating silence in the villa was shattered by the sharp, insistent ringing of a cell phone. The sound came from Chloe, who was still a heap on the floor. She flinched, fumbling in her purse with trembling hands. The screen read, "MOM," grasping it like a lifeline. She answered, her voice choked with sobs. "Mom." "Chloe, what on earth is going on?" Her mother's voice was a frantic, furious shriek. Your father, he was just taken away from the school by investigators from the D.S. office. They're saying he took bribes from parents, that he falsified records for teacher promotions. What is happening? Did you make someone angry? Boom. Another bomb detonated in Chloe's mind, leaving only darkness and a high-pitched ringing. Her father, the high school principal who had spent his entire life obsessing over his reputation, arrested for bribery. Her head snapped up, her horrified gaze locking onto the man standing in the shadows, watching her with the cold detachment of a god. There was no surprise on Julian's face, only the calm certainty of a plan coming to fruition. It was him. It had to be him. Mom, Chloe's lips moved, but no sound came out. And that's not all, her mother wailed, her voice thick with accusation. Your brother just called, cry his eyes out. He said his partners kicked him out of his startup. They're accusing him of embezzling funds, and they're pressing charges. Chloe, what did you do? Is it him? Is it that husband of yours? Chloe couldn't hear the rest. The phone slipped from her nerveless fingers, thudding softly onto the plush carpet. She sat there, her eyes vacant, her soul hollowed out. It was over. Everything was over. Her family, her support system, the last tattered remnants of her life. Julian had incinerated it all without a flicker of remorse. He wasn't just destroying her. He was salting the earth, ensuring she had nowhere and no one to run to. The other guests were frozen in terror. Leah bit down hard on her lip to keep from making a sound, terrified of drawing the monster's attention. Mark had shrunk into a sofa cushion, wishing the earth would swallow him whole. They were witnessing a level of vengeance so total, so utterly devastating, it chilled them to the bone. Just then, there was a soft knock at the villa's main door. The housekeeper opened it to admit two men in impeccable suits, carrying briefcases. The man in the lead was David Roth, his gold-rimmed glasses reflecting the light. Roth walked directly to the center of the room and nodded to Julian. Mr. Vance, it's time. Julian gave a slight, affirmative grunt. Roth turned his attention to the broken woman on the floor. His voice was steady, professional, and as cold as the legal statutes it invoked. Mrs. Miller, good evening. I am David Roth, Mr. Vance's legal counsel. On his behalf, I am formally serving you with this divorce settlement and notice of asset division. He retrieved two thick documents from his briefcase and held them out to her. Chloe's glazed eyes fell upon the cover page. The words divorce agreement were branded into her vision. No, I won't sign, she whispered, a final, desperate plea in her voice. She looked up at Julian, tears streaming down her face. Julian, honey, I know I was wrong. I'm so sorry, please. Just give me one more chance. I'll do anything you say. Please don't do this. Please. Her begging was pathetic. Julian simply looked down at her, his eyes a barren wasteland, devoid of any emotion. He didn't say a word. He just gave a slight tilt of his head, signaling for Roth to continue. Roth, his face impassive, began to read the terms aloud. Pursuant to this agreement, based on Mrs. Miller's admission of significant fault during the marriage, including but not limited to fraudulent concealment of contraceptive use and public acts resulting in severe emotional distress to her spouse, Mr. Vance is filing as the aggrieved party. Therefore, Mrs. Miller forfeits all claims to Mr. Vance's primary assets, including all shares of Keystone Capital, the premarital properties known as the Cloud Crest Villa and the Horizon Tower penthouse, the postnuptial, personally funded property at One Riverfront Plaza, and all funds and securities held within Mr. Vance's personal accounts. Mrs. Miller will receive a one-time, legally mandated settlement of $500,000 for basic living expenses. Furthermore, Roth turned a page, his voice unwavering. Regarding the condominium at Lakeview Terrace, deed of gift records confirm a reversionary clause. As the marital relationship, which was the basis of the gift, is being dissolved, ownership of the property legally reverts to the heir of the grantor, Mr. Julian Vance. You will have 30 days to vacate the premises and transfer the title. He closed the file. In summary, Mrs. Miller, you have 7 business days to sign this agreement. If you refuse, we will file a contested divorce suit in court. All associated legal fees will be your sole responsibility. Roth placed the documents and a pen in front of her. Please sign here. 500,000. Walk away with nothing. Lose the apartment. Chloe mumbled the words, each one a new twist of a knife. She looked from the pen to Julian, her eyes screaming for mercy. Julian finally spoke, his voice quiet but absolute. Sign it. It's your last and only option. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the terrified audience before returning to her. Unless you'd like the D. To find more evidence of your father's bribery. Or perhaps the amount your brother embezzled needs to be recalculated. The threat was naked, cold, final. Chloe's body trembled, the last of her strength draining away. She had no cards left to play. Her pleas were meaningless against the cold, hard wall of his power and resolve. Under the horrified and pitying stares of the people she once called friends, Chloe reached for the pen. It felt as if it weighed 1,000 pounds. Hot tears splashed onto the signature line, smudging the ink. Biting her lip so hard she could taste blood, she signed away her life. Roth collected the signed documents. Mr. Vance, it is done. Julian nodded, his gaze not lingering on Chloe for even a second. He turned to his remaining guests. Thank you for coming. You may see yourselves out. It was a dismissal. They practically scrambled over each other to escape the House of Horrors. Soon, the only people left were Julian and the empty shell of the woman on the floor. He walked to the window and stood with his back to her, looking out at the dark night. His reflection was a cold, stone silhouette. Be out of here by 9 a.m. tomorrow, he said, his voice flat. You have 3 days to clear out the condo. Leave the keys with the concierge. Without another word, he turned and walked to his study, the heavy door closing behind him with a soft, final thud, sealing the two of them in separate worlds forever. In the vast, opulent living room, all that remained was the sound of Chloe's choked, hopeless sobs, echoing in the cold, empty air. Chapter 8. The city lights bled into a blurry watercolor through the rain-streaked car window. Julian sat in the back of the Bentley, eyes closed. The hushed tones of a classical symphony filled the cabin, insulating him from the storm outside. His phone vibrated. A secure message from Shadow. The words were sparse. Mark Phillips. Rooftop. Jumped. Confirmed DOA. Julian opened his eyes. There was not a flicker of emotion in their depths. He typed a reply. Clean up. Understood. Came the immediate response. Mark Phillips. The fool who had offered up his face at the reunion. Driven to the edge by predatory loans, he had chosen the only exit he could find. It was an expected outcome. When greed and stupidity are weaponized, self-destruction is the logical conclusion. The thought was a minor data point, a loose end to be tied up. As the car swept through the financial district, giant LED billboards flashed the evening news. The anchor's voice was a muffled drone, but the headlines were clear enough. Breakthrough in the Momentum Tech accounting fraud case. Former CEO Ryan Carter has been formally arrested by federal agents. All personal and corporate assets have been frozen. He faces a sentence of 10 years or more. The screen cut to footage of Ryan's arrest. The once slick tech mogul was unrecognizable in a drab prison-issued jumpsuit, his hair matted, his eyes vacant and hollowed out with despair. He was a pathetic, broken figure, shielding his face from the cameras as he was led away. Julian's gaze passed over the screen without interest. Ryan's fate had been sealed the moment he pressed send. Prison, public disgrace, financial ruin, a far more fitting punishment for a man of his vanity than mere bankruptcy. The car turned onto a quieter street. A storefront with a sign that read Glow by Leah was dark and shuttered. A bright orange, closed by order of the health department, sticker was plastered across the glass door. Inside, furniture was overturned in a chaotic mess. A woman in a raincoat was hauling the last of her boxes into a beat-up moving van, her back slumped in defeat. Leah Collins, the woman who reveled in documenting the humiliation of others. Her business had collapsed under an avalanche of lawsuits and bad press. Her carefully constructed influencer lifestyle was gone, leaving her bankrupt and disgraced, forced to retreat to the very life she had fought so hard to escape. The Bentley glided past without slowing. The ruin of these people's lives was nothing more than scenery to him now. Their pain, their despair. It was all just the pre-written score of his symphony of revenge. His phone buzzed again. David Roth. Mr. Vance, the divorce is finalized. The settlement has been wired to Mrs. Miller's account. The title transfer for the Lakeview Terrace property will be completed within 3 business days. Good, Julian said and ended the call. It was finished. Chloe Miller, a name that was now just an empty echo, had vanished from his world with her $500,000 and a few suitcases. She would return to a family she had helped ruin, to live out her days in the shadow of her own failure and regret. The Bentley descended into the private garage beneath the Keystone Capital headquarters. The elevator ascended silently to the top floor. As the doors opened and Julian stepped into his sprawling office, a space that commanded a view of the entire city, a pure and potent wave of satisfaction washed over him. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking apart, and pillars of golden sunlight poured down, setting the rain-washed metropolis ablaze. He stood before the window, hands clasped behind his back. The light illuminated the hard, perfect lines of his profile. In his eyes was the reflection of the kingdom below, a world of power and capital that was entirely his. There was no emptiness, no remorse, only the clean, exhilarating thrill of absolute victory. The deceiver was disgraced and disowned. The humiliators were ruined, imprisoned, or in exile. The betrayer was cast out with nothing, sentenced to a life of regret. He had targeted each one with surgical precision, laid his traps with cold calculation, and watched as they stumbled toward their inevitable, ruinous fates. Every step was by his design. Every outcome was perfect. The cleansing fire of his revenge had burned away all the lies and filth of his marriage, leaving behind only this, a vast, clear world under his complete control. Julian took a deep breath. The crisp, clean air filled his lungs. It was the scent of freedom, the scent of power. He picked up the intercom, his voice steady, resonant, and utterly confident. Notify the department heads. Conference room 1 in 10 minutes. We're greenlighting the final phase of the Starfire acquisition. Effective immediately, a new campaign had already begun. And in his world, there were no longer any weaknesses. There was only the unconquered territory that lay before him, waiting to be claimed.